Take these, and this applies to the EU.
Okay.
Take these chains from my heart and set me free. You've grown cold and no longer care for me. All my faith in you is gone, but the EU lingers on. Take these chains from our country and set me free. I'm Winston McKenzie, and you're listening to Raw 51 AM.
Yes, you are indeed, and you're listening to Perspectives here on Raw this afternoon, every Tuesday from 3 to 4. On the show this week, we have so many panellists. The studio is jam-packed full of panellists, and we have representatives from 4 of the main 5 political parties. Representing UKIP this week, we have Jack Hadfield, and defending their election results, we have Matt Pearce from the Labour Party. We have Jack from the Lib Dems and Joe from the Conservative Party. How are we all?
Good, thank you.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, Jack, I'll start with you. The Lib Dems net gained most of the most council seats in the country, but based on what happened in Scotland, was it a bad night?
I think that the election results in England were possibly sort of the more important thing for the Lib Dems. I mean, in Scotland we sort of maintained our position, which is sort of a good thing considering the losses that we made last year in Scotland. And I mean, the votes that the gain that we made in England, the biggest gain of any party of 30 seats, is probably a sign that the fight back that we're doing sort of a grassroots level, which is what the Lib Dems do best, and really getting out there and campaigning on people's doorsteps is sort of the more encouraging sign for me, I think. And it was quite an encouraging night, I think, for the Liberal Democrats.
Thanks, Jack. Just to let you know as well, you can get involved in the show today by tweeting us at Warwick Polsock or at Perspectives Raw. You can click the contact tab on the message player if you're listening in, or you can Facebook one of us or the Society. Joe, good night for the Conservatives in Scotland. I'm sure you'll agree. Did you expect that?
Yeah, no, I mean, Ruth Davidson is an absolutely fantastic candidate. I think it was only a matter of time until we had a real Conservative resurgence in Scotland, especially given the election of Jeremy Corbyn, which is making the Labour Party slightly unpalatable to most of the electorate. I think what's really been missed out from most things, and this is even reported in The Guardian, overall there's an 11% swing in the local elections since these elections were last contested by the Conservative Party. Now, I'm sure you've probably seen that weird graphic that's going around of look at how many red seats there are. Of course, this is a complete falsity, as most of England didn't have local elections, as Jeremy Corbyn found out when he launched his campaign in Nottingham, despite there having no elections in Nottingham. I think you really actually see quite a good night for the Conservatives over 3 nights. And quite frankly, I'm really quite proud of how the party performed.
Do you think that in Scotland, though, people were voting for the Conservatives, or they were more voting for Ruth Davidson and staying in the Union?
I seem to remember Jack told me that she didn't mention Conservative once in her speech, apparently.
Well, the best thing to do when in elections is to aim for the candidates themselves and say these are what binds us together as a large coalition party. And that's the main thing that Ruth really hammered home, is to say, look, I know this seems as slightly a toxic thing to a lot of people in Scotland, but really, quite frankly, what we stand up for, good bit of nationalism, helping to get things brought locally to Scotland, really growing the economy. I think she really hammered that message home and got rid of quite a lot of the misnomers that have been put out about the Conservative Party in Scotland, really since the Thatcher era onwards. And I think she has been such a fantastic mouthpiece for the Conservative cause in Scotland, and I'm looking forward to Ruth Davidson doing some absolute fantastic things in her career.
And Matt, looking at Labour's performance, obviously there was a lot of success found in London, but nationwide and especially in Scotland, it was a bit of a whitewash.
Yeah, I think in London and Bristol and the other mayoral elections, it went very well. And then I'd say in Scotland, it was very poor results. I think I certainly wouldn't attribute that to Corbyn. I'd say that there is the SNP are now being the Nationalist Party. The Tories have become the Unionist Party, and there's just Labour needs to take a stand on either of those sides, because it's quite disheartening to see all these Scottish people voting for the Tories. It feels a bit wrong. I just totally against their interests, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, it was a mixed bag. I wouldn't say it was a step forward. I wouldn't say it was a step back. I think it's time for everyone to get behind the leadership and see where we can take it in the coming years.
Yeah, but I mean, as you rightly say, I think all 4 mayoral elections that were contested, Labour won. I think winning back 2 of the cities involved. But what how do you think that Scotland has reacted to Corbyn's brand of socialism? Why do you think it hasn't had any traction?
I think, have you ever done those political compass tests where you've got like the Labour in one bit and the Tories in one bit? The SNP, yes. They operate by operating in every single corners of that political compass. Just wherever they need to be, they will be. I don't think they've got much of an ideology, except let's have an independent Scotland. So that's why, Labour can be socialist, they can be social democratic, they can be centrist, but at the end of the day, nationalism might sound quite comforting to some people, so I think it's time for Labour to take a stand for an independent Scotland or strongly on the unionist side, but whichever way, it needs to start taking a stance because as the Lib Dems know, it's not helpful being in the middle.
And just before we move on to Jack and UKIP, how would you rate Kezia Dugdale's performance in the Scottish election? Do you think she's had a high enough profile?
I do like Kezia Dugdale, but I don't think, obviously, the Tories had a very strong candidate. I wouldn't disagree with that, but I think it's more about the person, and it's more about the issues that have been stirring in Scotland for decades. I think whoever would have been in charge, the results would have been similar.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Matt. And Jack, moving on now to UKIP's performance. I know you're not obviously strictly a UKIP man, but you tend to align that way. How do you assess UKIP's performance in Scotland and Wales?
Yeah, well, I think in Wales they did very well. I think that they got 7 or 8 seats, I believe, in the Welsh Assembly, up from 0 last time round. I think because UKIP has been, placing a focus and getting ready for the Welsh elections since about last year, and just after the general, we've been putting big names to be elected to the Welsh Assembly, such as Mark Reckless.
Neil Hamilton.
And Neil Hamilton as well, obviously the ex-Conservative.
Do you think, Neil Hamilton isn't what you typically associate Welsh UKIP members to be. Why do you think they've sort of wheeled Neil Hamilton out to Wales? Do you think that's counterproductive?
I don't think it's counterproductive. I'm not really entirely sure why they did it. I think, again, probably just for media attention to make sure.
Not the best media attention, though, is it necessarily?
Well, all press is good press, really. When it comes to actually, being, seeking attention and, actually getting media coverage for your elections. But yeah, so I think what UKIP have done is they've been able to knock down Labour's majority in Wales, so they no longer will be able to rule as just this single party government. I think what it shows is that the Welsh people are kind of fed up of just this Labour government, which has been really in power since the first Welsh Assembly elections.
Well, the Scottish people didn't seem to receive UKIP very well, did they? I mean, David Coburn did not have a good showing. Would you agree?
Yeah, no. UKIP's never really been that popular in Scotland, which is, again, why I think the party focused all their attention in Wales, where they knew they could really break ground and actually make a difference. I think, now we've got this solid holding in Wales. Next time around, after the European referendum, after the next European elections, I think then they'll turn their focus up to Scotland. Now we have this solid groundwork prepared in Wales.
Thank you very much, Jack. And we're just going to quickly hear now from Sadiq Khan as we move on to the London elections.
Thank you, London. London is the greatest city in the world. I'm so proud of our city. I'm deeply humbled by the hope and trust you have placed in me today. I grew up on a council estate just a few miles from here. Back then, I never dreamt that someone like me could be elected as Mayor of London. And I want to say thank you to every single Londoner for making the impossible possible today. I have a burning ambition for London, an ambition that will guide me every day as Mayor of our great city. I want every single Londoner to get the opportunities that our city gave to me and my family. The opportunities not just to survive, but to thrive. The opportunities to build a better future for you and your family.
Notice Sadiq Khan didn't mention Zach Goldsmith there by name, but Zach Goldsmith did mention Sadiq Khan in his speech where he basically confessed that he had lost.
I'm disappointed, of course, by the result, that I won't be able to deliver a manifesto that I'm really proud of, a plan to make London the greenest and cleanest city in the world, a plan to keep our city moving and growing, a plan to keep our city safe. But I want to pay tribute to all my fellow candidates, and in particular, I congratulate Sadiq Khan, and I wish him well as he sets out to build on the successes that we've seen under Boris Johnson and to take them even further. Thank you very much.
So an election victory there for Sadiq Khan, and I'll go to you first, Matt. A lot of the issues that Sadiq and Zach were fighting on were very, very similar, looking at housing, transport and crime. What do you think really separated Sadiq from Zach and got him elected?
I'd have to say... Oh, by the way, it was nice for Zach Goldsmith to show a little bit of respect to Sadiq Khan then. I think that really hurt Zach Goldsmith. His campaign, it was horrible, it was divisive, it was nasty. It's not what anyone wants to see. And clearly Londoners were too bright to fall into that horrible trap, because I think Sadiq Khan showed, and that was a great speech there, by the way. I like where he's come from compared to Zach Goldsmith. I think... hope triumphed over fear. It's good to see.
Joe, looking at Zach Goldsmith's campaign, do you think that it was... Do you believe yourself that it was a racist campaign? And do you think that the questions that Zach Goldsmith and his campaign were asking regarding Sadiq Khan were ones that really fitted into a mayoral campaign?
No, I don't think it was racist at all. I think the problem with the campaign is it didn't highlight Zach Goldsmith's great track record on environmental issues, his great track record as a local member of Parliament, where he received the largest swing in 2015 from around 4,000 to 22,000. There was so much to focus on. But what happened, that first leaflet, when he explained how Sadiq Khan had allowed Jeremy Corbyn to hijack the Labour Party and bring in a new sort of much more radical socialism that hadn't been seen before, that word was picked up. And then that word became sort of the main word, synonymous with Zach Goldsmith's campaign. And that, quite frankly, was the real shame for it. And, you know, Zach doesn't have the Teflon-like ability of Boris Johnson. That it just stuck to him. And I think that was the real shame with Zach Goldsmith's campaign.
Do you think Boris Johnson would have beaten Sadiq Khan in this election?
Yeah, I think Boris Johnson would have. I think that's mainly because he's Boris Johnson. He seems to be able to do anything. He got stuck on a zip wire and became more popular. You know, that could never happen to anyone else. I do want to say, obviously, congratulations to Sadiq Khan on becoming my new mayor. Also to the Lib Dems fielding a candidate whose name was Pigeon. That was incredible. But I really do think that Zach Goldsmith's campaign just went down the wrong tangent.
Do you think that this was a campaign that was in any way controlled by Zach, or do you think this was coming from Linton Crosby?
I think this was CCHQ campaign. When you look at it, it's not the Zach Goldsmith that I've met. It's not the Zach Goldsmith that I've seen. Zach is usually a very, very good communicator, very, very passionate, very, very forceful in what he puts forward. And what we saw was someone who had to sort of put down his ideas of localism, who had to downplay his environmentalism. And I really think if we'd allowed Goldsmith to be Goldsmith and not sort of pushed forward CCHQ, you know, that sort of message more, I think we would have had a fantastic campaign. You know, Linton Crosby was great with Boris. He's great when you have to hold back a candidate. Obviously, Boris, for several reasons, needs to be gagged 90% of the time. But someone like Zach, who doesn't fly off the hook, who doesn't go on sort of lunacy walks, he would have been great just to have let go, let him rip, and, you know, for Londoners really to have fully engaged with him.
Jack, either Jack, I can bring on this. Or Jack, let's go Jack Abbey. What do you make of the Conservatives' targeting of the Asian community in London and their attempts to possibly bring division between different different members?
I don't think politically, first of all, I don't think it was a particularly wise move, as we've sort of seen. But in just sort of general terms, I think it's been described as a despicable campaign, and I think that level of divisiveness in a city that's multicultural as London really isn't necessary, and it's not going to help the city as far as I can tell.
And Jack? Other Jack?
Yeah, well, I think Zach was right to target some of the Asian communities, because historically Conservatives have had a lot of support from the Sikh communities, especially they've always been quite conservative, and from the Hindu communities as well. But his thing with Bollywood, where you couldn't mention a single actor or film, there's a difference between appealing and engaging with a certain section of the population and just flat out pandering to them.
Jack, I don't quite recall what Bollywood moment you mean.
I'm a Bollywood fan, so anything with a Bollywood theme, I will lap it up.
When you say you're a Bollywood fan, do you have a favourite actor or a favourite Bollywood film?
Oh no, you're gonna. I wouldn't be able to. What do you think? No, I'm not going to give you one. I can't think of a favourite.
Think of a single Bollywood film or actor.
I can't think of a favourite. I love almost everything about Bollywood. I love the atmosphere. I love the colour. I love the excitement.
My name is Sadiq Khan. I'm running to be the Mayor of London, and you're listening to Raw.
Zach Goldsmith's infamous Bollywood remarks there. Jack, moving on to the Lib Dems very quickly on that. Caroline Pidgeon got 4.62%, which was an improvement by about 0.5% on Brian Paddock last time. Do you think that's a good night? I mean, UKIP were widely predicted to finish above the Lib Dems, in third place or fourth place, and Lib Dems pushed into fifth, but Caroline held on. Do you see that as a good?
And she was also re-elected to the London Assembly.
She was re-elected to the London Assembly. Jack?
I mean, fifth place in a party that wants to be the third party of Britain isn't particularly good, but then at the same time, London has never been a Lib Dem stronghold, and I don't think London is likely to become a Lib Dem stronghold anytime soon. Really, you can see that.
Fourth is a good result.
Yeah, just about, yeah.
Okay, Jack, do you think fifth was a good result for UKIP? Peter Whittle, I know obviously UKIP did better than the Lib Dems on the London Assembly. They got 2 seats, whereas the Lib Dems only got 1. But Peter Whittle finished behind Caroline Pidgeon by quite a way rather. Do you think that was a negative result for UKIP?
I don't think it was a great result, but again, really between the Greens, Lib Dems, and UKIP, there weren't really a huge amount of votes. To be honest, most of the voting was focused on between, choosing Sadiq or Zach. They are the only real candidates for London after that. Really, it wouldn't have really made a difference, which the parties came in third, fourth, and fifth. As I said, it was a 2-horse race from the start. I think it would have been bad if, for example, the Women's Equality Party came fifth above UKIP, or any of the other minor parties, and UKIP got pushed further down. So I think fifth place is acceptable. But any lower than that, I think we'd have to take a serious look at the campaign.
And before we cross to James Blake's new song, Jack, Abbey, I just want to go to you. And do you think that the Lib Dems are being squeezed by the Green Party at all? Do you think there's a lot of voters that have been taken away that is just leading to not a lot of electoral success for either party?
I think maybe. It's sort of, Lib Dems and the Green Party don't really sort of occupy the same political space, but then at the same time, I guess many of the protest votes against the establishment that would sometimes go to the Liberal Democrats are going to the Green Party. I definitely think that's happening.
And Matt, just finally for me, do you think that's worrying that the Greens did so well in London? Obviously, a lot of people sort of thought the Greens to be, decarbonised now that he's the leader of the Labour Party, and all the votes shifting over to you, or indeed, to maybe Mr. Galloway. How do you think, who obviously prides himself as being Corbyn's closest ally, were you disappointed with how well the Greens did?
No, I think...
Because they should be your voters, really, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I think that. But it's kind of nice to see progressive parties getting in London. I would have to say, I don't really get the case for voting Green anymore, but clearly some people kind of seem to be doing it. It's a good result for them. If I had to pick a kind of a third party, I would certainly prefer them over the Lib Dems or UKIP.
My name is Jacob Rees-Mogg, and you're listening to Raw.
And now with a bit of urgent news, here is our head of news, Jack Abbey.
Live from your student radio station,
this is Raw News Update.
A piece of breaking news for you here on Raw 12:51 a.m. A petition to debate a motion for NUS disaffiliation has gained 500 signatures and will now be debated at an all-student meeting on Monday. The vote will then go up online for the rest of the week for students to vote as to whether Warwick SU should disaffiliate from the NUS. For more information about this, follow us on Twitter at Raw News Warwick. Follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/Raw News Warwick, and vote on our poll on Twitter as to whether you think that we should disaffiliate from the NUS.
Thank you very much for that, Jack.
You're listening to Raw, 12:51 AM, bringing you your favourite shows 24/7.
You lot are locked into Tux Tuesdays.
You listen to the Daisy and Amy show.
This is living up the weekends at 1 o'clock.
Hear the best new music.
You and your love for Taylor Swift.
No, don't. That's gone out on air now.
Stay informed with Raw News Update.
Certainly we're one of the few universities in the country who get to sit on the University Senate.
Some people have viewed this protest as a reaction to one person, which can seem like a bit of a witch hunt. What would you say to those people?
Keep the score with our daily sports analysis.
They have dug deep. They have equalised. Warwick 6, Coventry 6.
Discover the best on-campus talent.
This is the show where we bring on creative writing homegrown at Warwick.
Sitting on a bridge, looking at a broken edge at the gap, too far to jump and the drop too far below.
And follow us as we go outside the studio.
I'm Lauren and I'm sitting with the beautiful Foxes. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
If you've been asleep, you have so missed out.
You're listening to Raw, 12:51 AM. This is your student radio station.
I'm George Galloway, and you're listening to Raw. It's raw, and it's fantastic.
And that was obviously George Galloway, and we had a bit of breaking news about the NUS. Alistair, what are your opinions on whether Warwick do you think firstly we should be having a referendum style choice on the NUS, or do you think it's not really a big issue enough to get students out of their study habits?
I've said this before. I think we should leave. But I think the best way to do that is through a referendum.
Okay, and Joe, what are your opinions on the NUS as an institution?
Yeah, I can't wait till we leave. That's pretty much it. We look at sort of, people say you get discounts, you get the ability to have more funding. NUS outlets, SU outlets here earn enough to cover that, and also, quite frankly, I don't mind losing £5 at Pizza Express.
So I won't be able to get my extra cheese at the bread oven if we leave the NUS, is that what you're trying to say? And I shouldn't be bothered about that. Matt, please.
Seeing as you can no longer get hot bread at the bread oven, that is far more of an issue that we should be focusing on.
Matt, do you want to make sure I get cheese at the bread oven and 40% off Domino's?
Yes, I do. No, I think we should stay in NUS. I know there's been a lot of controversy as of late. I know it's not a perfect organisation, far from it, but I think to kind of be left on our own, and there's also all of these practical issues. I mean, on campus you have all these kind of people who belong to kind of the political right talking about the SU. They should be helping students out with their living expenses. They should be doing practical things. The NUS helps with these practical things. It makes sure that lots of prices are a lot lower. Beer would be more expensive, Joe. Beer would be more expensive.
We wouldn't have terrace bus stop.
The pubs in Leamington are still cheaper than the terrace bar.
You've got to get the bus
That is
there.
Not at bus stop. I dispute that at bus stop hours. Barnaby, if I'm going to make a bold statement here, I want you to react to it.
Okay.
Do you think the people who support leaving the NUS are the same people that support leaving the EU, and that there's similar issues?
Yes, because I think that you get similar kind of ideas of a left-wing agenda's being pushed. We need to free ourselves. Might be a bit poorer, but it's better because now we have our kind of cultural freedom, whatever it is they say. But yeah, I think there's certainly a strong correlation between, as Matt said, people on the political right, particularly Eurosceptics.
That's interesting. And do you think that, Matt, that the same sort of people that we see wanting to desperately leave the NUS, starting these petitions, are the same people that want Brexit?
Yeah, I'd agree. I'd say that it's kind of very easy to propagate this kind of ideological kind of thing and not look at the practical benefits, and I think that applies to both arguments.
And Joe?
I think that's a shame when you look at the two people who've put forward this petition, Sam Carter and James Anderson, both who are big on the Remain in EU side.
Both are Tories on the political right.
So that automatically means that they want to leave the EU?
No,
because
but
they're Tories.
they're still on the
that's
political
just a
right.
complete misnomer. Have you missed the Prime Minister for the last couple of months? What you actually see here is people who are genuinely looking down at the issue and saying, we're actually better as our own SU, because it's damaging not only on a national scale to be affiliated with some of the more lunacy that is coming out from the NUS, but also because we think we can actually act as a university better, and it actually helps people who then get elected to SU to be able to enter sort of the business world more. What they're doing is they're helping allocate funding, they're helping work these things much more. I mainly do think that this is something that all students aren't divided on across a political spectrum. I think the EU is something completely separate. You can't just say, I like leaving things, therefore I must leave the NUS.
And Alistair, how would you respond to that statement that it's the same sorts of people supporting Brexit and supporting leaving the NUS?
I mean, there's always going to be some crossover, but I think there's a lot of cross-partisan support for leaving both things. So I'm not sure I'd make that statement as definitively, or that it would even be that surprising. There's always going to be a certain proportion of people that, on principle, will want to leave something if they see behaviour or rhetoric which they find unpleasant. And I think that's probably true of both institutions.
Just to come back, Joe, on your point regarding the money that can be saved, Isaac Lee made a blog post regarding some of the money, and he said that the SU previously generated an income of £26,850 from the sale of NUS Extra cards. Warwick SU got a total discount of £61,400 on soft drinks and alcohol, and also says the SU spends an annual total of £51,391 by affiliating with the NUS for grants for the staff team. So there clearly are a lot of financial implications that would come about if we were to leave the NUS. How would you plan to address them?
Well, I believe the overall disposable annual income from outlets on campus is near $1 million. And I think you can check out all of this at sort of the people who are calling for a referendum on the NUS and people who are calling to leave the NUS. What I'd actually say is that Isaac does want to stay in. It is very, very easy to put it forward that this is very simply what we get. But I do think it is far, far more financially viable to leave. And besides, on top of that, comes with the benefits of not being associated with certain of the things that are frowned upon by wider societies that have created a negative attitude towards students. And I think that's a real important thing, actually, of getting away from some of the negative implications that the NUS has placed upon students unfairly.
But would you argue that your campaign to leave the NUS is an ideological one over an economic one?
No, it's both. That we're saying that, look, it's financially viable to be, it's not an ideological position, it's a rational position, it's something that's been looked at and thought out from, and I think that's the main point to hammer in with this, is it's not coming from an ideology of leaving everything.
So when you say economically viable, do you mean that students wouldn't be that hard, they wouldn't be hit that hard and it'd probably okay,
no, they wouldn't
or
at
do you
all.
mean they'd be better off?
But they wouldn't at all. I think there's actually a case where you could say that students would be able to be better off. I do think that is certainly an argument that can and is being made.
But how? I mean, we've just gone through the finances there. The SU we've gone through
student. Some of the financial figures there. I do think there are many more financial figures that are out there that are accessible for the rest of the student population. Isaac Lee's, no offence to him, article is not the be all and end all. It is not the gospel on Warwick SU finance, and I think that is something really important to get out there.
By the SU finance team.
No,
it's not just Isaac.
I say then suddenly it's irrefutable. It's irrefutable. It is the greatest thing that's ever been produced.
Do you have some counter statistics?
Yeah, there are counter statistics. I'm
going to make another bold statement as well on this.
Yeah.
The only people, and I want to see how you'll respond. The only people that get involved in student politics are all left wing and socialists. How do you respond? The only people that, for instance, who go to the NUS conferences is dominated by left wing students. Hence the election of the new SU president, not SU, the NUS president.
I think there is a small portion of people from both spectrums that get involved. I think the main issue is that not enough people are engaged overall. It's not a matter of sort of too many left-wing people or not enough right-wing people. The issue is overall, not enough students are involved. And that's got to be the main aim for this whole thing. And I think, if anything, the one benefit that this NUS referendum could bring is to actually get more students interested into it. It's a shame that it's happening at exam period.
Yeah. Alistair, how do you respond to that bold statement that I've just adumbrated there?
Well, if you look at the outcomes that they get in the voting at the NUS conferences, you would presume that, it's dominated by left-wing, and not just left-wing students, but extreme, radical left-wing students with some rather questionable views, I think,
And Barnaby?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way to remember is that, because this being a students' union, the people going to vote are primarily young, more likely to be left-wing, and members of a union, more likely to be left-wing. And while I think the more radical elements are louder, that's not to say that there aren't more moderate voices on either side of the spectrum who are involved, but just aren't publicised as much.
And talking of moderate voices, Jack, I'll give you the final word on this. If someone could just get a mic to Jack, and I'll hear his final words on why he loves, or I presume doesn't love, the NUS.
Yeah, I'm really not a big fan of the NUS. I do think it's dominated by left-wing politics. Again, probably because it is, it is obviously students who are obviously more likely to be left-wing. But if you look at our current, at our union, we've got, it's dominated by members of Warwick Free Education and Labour. I think it's a minority of students who actually get involved in student politics. I do support leaving the NUS, but unlike Joe, I don't think it will get more people interested. I think the amount of people who are really interested in student politics will stay about the same. But I certainly want to be disaffiliated from this NUS, especially with the recently elected president.
Thank you very much, Jack. We're going to move on now to a different person. This is moving abroad now somewhat, and we're going to be talking about this man.
Gross domestic product. They just built a hotel in Syria. Can you believe this?
Donald Trump has said today that Sadiq Khan could be an exception to his his idea to ban all Muslims. Barnaby, are you surprised that Donald Trump's gone back on his policy to ban every single Muslim?
Amazingly enough, I'm not surprised. Because surprisingly enough, when you make idiotic statements purely for the benefit of baying racists, when confronted with reality, you're often required to row back a little bit.
Fair enough. And Matt, do you think it's right that Donald Trump should be elected president and puts this ban on Muslims, that the Mayor of London will be allowed to go to the United States, as Boris did on many occasions?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with the previous point that he's had a certain electorate for the past few months, and he's going to have a different electorate over the next few months. He's got to go back on these comments. I don't think the voters should let him. I think that he's even said any of those things, and now he's going back in it, saying that Sadiq Khan is kind of an acceptable Muslim, even though everyone else isn't, is abhorrent. And I don't think. I really hope Americans kind of look past any sort of appeal that he could have. Hypothetically, I don't quite see it myself.
Is this not traditionally part of US politics that in the primary races to become party candidates, they have to appear as right-wing or as left-wing as possible, depending on the party, and then attempt to detoxify themselves in the rest of the process towards the election?
Yeah, no, I do agree that is a phenomenon that does take place. Hillary Clinton might appear a bit tougher on banks in the last few months, not so much in the next few months, but there's a line. And he's gone so far past that line that surely he can't be elected.
Someone who I know does support Trump 2016 and doesn't see it as, a sort of serious or daunting issue is Jack Hadfield, who's on the panel now. Jack, why do you think Donald Trump should be the next president of the US and should be able to get away, quite frankly, with the comments about Muslims?
Well, I think the primary reason why he should be the next president of the United States is that I think he really does want to make America great again. I know it's his slogan, but I think out of all the candidates there, I think he really actually does care about the United States and its citizens, unlike some of the others who are...
What about their Muslim citizens, Jack?
Well, it said he proposed a temporary ban on Muslim migration.
They will
until,
absolutely love that.
Right? But other presidents have done so in the past.
Because that was such a great idea.
Well, Roosevelt proposed a temporary ban on Japanese immigration during the Second World War. There was a temporary ban.
That makes it okay.
On
Just Jack, if I could just get some.
Second World War.
All right.
Mr. David, order! Miss Order! Order!
Right, now we've all calmed down a bit. Joe, would you like to respond to Jack?
I think what we're really seeing is the death of the Republican Party.
So will you be supporting the Democrats?
I can't wait until the first female president of the United States gets elected. I've got real problems with Donald Trump being the nominee for the Republican Party. I think they've lost their moderate side. They've never been able to come to terms with George Bush, bailed out the banks, ran large social programs, and in response to him, they've slightly driven off a cliff of lunacy, which has culminated in the wig-wearing what's-it that is Donald Trump.
And Alistair, you're shaking your head there. If we could just pass the mic to Alistair, why do you think that Joe's wrong on this particular issue?
Just the madness of supporting Hillary Clinton. It just goes beyond belief, in my opinion.
But surely she's the least worst option compared to Donald Trump.
I mean, yeah, but that's like asking whether you'd rather have cancer or AIDS. Like, it's not a good choice.
Right, okay.
It's a diabolical choice. Trump, yeah, he's bad, and he says some horrendous things. But again, I don't think he believes them. On the other hand, you've got Hillary, who doesn't say anything controversial, but is just going to be another big government Democrat. How does any of that improve the situation in America? It's just going to encourage the kind of corporatocracy, which has ruined it up to this point already.
Barnaby looks like he is, gagging to have a response to that.
I can see the point you make about Hillary Clinton and her tie to big business, but I think you forget that there is a big change in the Democratic Party below the presidential level. I mean, people like Liz Warren, Bernie Sanders are really their message to the future, which is almost harking back to like Teddy Roosevelt on the antitrust, anti-big business kind of thing. And she's not going to be able to ignore those sort of more left-wing voices because she won't be able to get re-elected. I mean, she's had enough trouble with Bernie Sanders in this primary, and if she does 4 years of sort of, centrism again, she's going to have to run into serious problems.
I agree with you.
I've sounded the siren, and unfortunately, we're going to have to move on with that. And I want to know, in a final word, I'll go round very quickly, and I want you to answer yes or no. Could Donald Trump be elected as the next president? Starting with you, Alistair.
Absolutely yes.
Joe.
Terrifyingly.
Jack.
100%. I'm getting ready for it.
Matt.
No.
Barnaby.
Probably not.
I don't think so. Niall?
I don't think so either.
And talking of things being unlikely, the Chilcot report today has been announced that the date is set for the 6th of July, I believe. And I assume you all know what the Chilcot report is with the Iraq War. And I think we're in that period now where, well, it's been in that period for a while where we're asking Maxwellisation, which is asking, people like Tony Blair as to whether everything in there was true or whether he wants to let it out. Alistair, do you think the Chilcot report will tell us anything we didn't know or anything of worth for that matter?
It'll probably tell us more than we know. It probably won't tell us anything that implicates Tony Blair in anything dodgy, so I don't think it's of that much value, to be honest.
Joe, do you think we'll finally see that Chilcot report now and it will be enlightening and we'll all know exactly why he did it and we can all go home and forget about it and Galloway can, stop shouting about it?
I think, firstly, it's taken horrendously long to get to this point. It's going to come out after George R.R. Martin has finished all of his Game of Thrones books and probably 7 sequels. It's not going to tell us anything new. It's not going to be a wonderfully enlightening document. We're going to get it and go, oh, it's exactly the same as all of the other reports. What an absolute waste of time and money.
Jack, do you think it's an absolute waste of time and money, the Chilcot report?
Yeah, I mean, they're really not going to reveal anything that we didn't know before. It's going to be the same thing, over and over again. I mean, if the government did do something wrong, really wrong, do you honestly think that they'd let the Chilcot report publish it? I think that's why it's taken them so long, because the government's, just making sure that nothing especially interesting, comes out.
We've only got a bit of time left, so Matt, if you would, very briefly, the Chilcot report. Have you been looking forward to the Chilcot report and finally seeing the reasons or the alleged reasons?
Yeah, I mean, it's a travesty that it's kind of taking this long. It will be a huge report. It'll be hundreds of thousands of words, and it will tell us that the Iraq War shouldn't have happened, and it probably won't implicate anyone. But it's still right that the report went ahead.
And Barnaby, very quickly.
I'd just like to say, you said it's going to be out on July the 6th. I don't say which year. Anyway,
yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Sorry, no, but I think it's.
We'll give you a correct answer for that. There we go.
Thank you. Can I get a badge? Yeah, I don't think it's going to tell us anything particularly interesting. We already know that Tony Blair was desperate to, chart with George Bush, had a weird passion for sort of what he called liberal interventionism, and went against international law. I mean, that's been known since 2003. So.
Right. Unfortunately, we have run out of time because now we are going to be playing an interview from when me and Niall caught up with Toby Young for Perspectives. And Niall, what did you think of old Toby?
It was a nice experience. When you're talking to him, it's very difficult to disagree with him. You think he's a very, very persuasive man, and we had a very interesting chat with him about what he felt was not at all a racist campaign by Zach Goldsmith, and was asking very, very legitimate questions. And we talked to him about his position on the EU, which is firmly Brexit.
It is indeed, and it was a good debate all round. Hugo Dixon sold a few of his books at the end.
Yeah, Hugo Dixon very
enjoyed his day out, didn't he?
Yeah, he very much enjoyed his day out, taking pictures and handing his book out. The editor of In Facts, I believe, and yeah, it was an interesting debate. It was quite a difficult crowd for Toby to win round because it was the European Society debate. I think
he made that point, didn't he? He was a bit annoyed.
Before the debate took place, I think it was 75% of students had already decided that they were going to stay in, and by the end, it was pretty much a similar figure. But they debated well, and there were some interesting points. I think there's a lack of knowledge on the EU for students. There wasn't really very much on Erasmus. They didn't seem to know very much about the scheme itself, or what would actually replace it if the UK were to leave the EU.
Okay, and thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you to all my panellists for being on the show. This has been me and Niall Johnson with Perspectives. Just to let you know, tomorrow night is the infamous Pole Sock question time. We have Roger Helmer coming, Mike O'Brien, the former Immigration Minister and MP. We have Baroness Burt coming. We have Wyn Grant coming, and Arabella Arkwright, who is on the board of Vote Leave. Not to be missed. But now I leave you with Toby Young's interview with Perspectives.
My name's Toby Young, and you're listening to Perspectives.
Hello, me and Henry are at the Warwick EU referendum debate, and we are joined by Toby Young, the Associate Editor of the Spectator and Telegraph Journalist. Toby, how are you?
I'm okay.
Did you enjoy the debate? How do you think it went?
Yeah, I thought it was quite lively. The audience seemed very engaged and pretty well informed. It was the second time I've debated Hugo, and we're going to debate each other again in a couple of weeks in Paris. But no, I always enjoy this kind of thing.
Were you shocked by the immediate poll results at the start? Showing, I think it was 75% of students here we're going to vote in, about 30%.
It is the Europe Society, isn't it? Isn't this the first event of the Europe Society?
This is the European Society, so not specifically an EU society, but I suppose a European culture society.
You wouldn't expect to win a debate about Brexit in the European Society, so I wasn't too shocked by the result.
If Brexit goes ahead, will Mr Cameron's position as Prime Minister be untenable?
Yeah, I think that's very hard to predict. The sort of conventional wisdom is that he'd find it very hard to cling on if Brexit wins. But the question will turn, I think, on whether there is a credible alternative Prime Minister in the wings. And it seems to me that the most prime ministerial person on the Brexit side is Michael Gove. But Michael Gove is also very loyal, and I think feels quite conflicted about being on the opposite side of this debate to David Cameron. So I don't think he'd make a move against Cameron in the event of Brexit winning. Boris might, but only if he thought he could definitely win. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion. And in politics, one thing I've discovered from having made lots of very confident predictions myself in the past is that it's very unpredictable, and often what something turns on is quite hard to anticipate, and it's often quite surprising.
So, in terms of the actual Tory party, the Conservative Party, do you think they will fully recover from this issue? I know it's been an issue that has been in the party for ages, but now this actual referendum has sort of split them with the whole Ian Duncan Smith resignation, and there seems to be a clear sort of dichotomy there. Do you think they will recover to the sort of party they were, united?
I think it would be more of a risk for the Conservative Party to have held the referendum in this Parliament, given how divisive it's been, if Jeremy Corbyn wasn't the leader of the Labour Party. But I just find it inconceivable that a Corbyn-led Labour Party would win in 2020. And it looks unlikely at this point that Corbyn will go before 2020.
Labour, though.
I tried to vote for Corbyn. I tried to become an associate member. I can't remember exactly what the terminology was now.
And you were filtered out?
I was
Sherlock Holmes.
I was winkled out, and I got a very snarky email from someone in Labour HQ saying they were keeping my money, but I wouldn't be allowed to vote. But you didn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out that my motives were a bit mischievous, because in the form online where it asks why you wanted to become an associate member, I put to consign Labour to electoral oblivion. and I now actually have kind of I'm having not the only one, I'm having a bit of buyer's remorse about Corbyn. He's been too effective, I think, at destroying the Labour Party. I mean, I hope actually just to make Labour lose the next general election, and not to consign the party to the dustbin of history. But I'm now beginning to think that Corbyn's leadership will be so disruptive that Labour will never recover.
Just moving back to the EU, if Brexit were to take place, do you think that this would have an adverse effect on the institution moving forwards? And if it was to have an adverse effect, would this negatively affect Britain? So looking at political instability, lack of trade agreements, that sort of thing.
Well, again, it's very hard to predict.
Yes.
But I think it's just as likely that it would have a positive effect. Hugo talked in the debate about the need to reform the EU, and many people on the Remain side sort of want to have their cake and eat it by saying they're not defending the EU in its present state, but they imagine a future in which a reformed EU would be very attractive. But we saw when David Cameron tried to renegotiate the terms of Britain's membership that the EU is extremely resistant to any reform, not least because it's really hard to get 27 other heads of state, all with their own kind of domestic political constituencies, to agree to a reform. And that's one of the reasons it's so difficult for the EU to conclude any trade agreements with places like China and America. And actually the only way to get the EU to embark upon meaningful reform might be the shock of Brexit, whereby they recognise that their dream, the Federalists recognise that the dream of a more integrated Europe is over, and it might then return to being a kind of glorified customs union.
You said then about David Cameron's renegotiation, and I was wondering, you obviously, it seems that you don't attribute that sort of failure to Cameron, you just see the EU as sort of unreformable. So do you not think if any other, I don't know, say Boris Johnson, who's more Eurosceptic, went to the table, do you think he would have got more, or do you think that was just impossible under this current EU?
No, I think they were nervous about granting any concessions to the UK because inevitably other non-Eurozone EU member states would want the same deal. But I also think that they're confident that the British people will vote to remain, and so didn't feel they needed to make any concessions in order to secure that result. And I think they just take for granted Britain's membership of the EU. And I think the worrying thing is that if we vote to remain, having been offered so little, that in future the threat that Britain may one day leave the EU which is one of the ways in which Britain has been able to secure some of the protections like the rebates and the veto and so forth. If that threat is found to be empty, which it will if we vote to remain, then I can easily see those protections being eroded in the quite near future.
And just to finish off, how would you respond to the argument that Brexit would only be a victory for nationalists and the uber-rich, which has been put forward, I think it was by the Greek Prime Minister in an article in The Guardian? It's hard to deny that a swathe of Brexit opinion is down to immigration fears.
I don't think Brexit would necessarily benefit the uber-rich. And actually, if you look at the people who've lined up on the Remain side, many of them are very rich.
Okay,
all the money
rich,
seems to be on the Remain side. Like Goldman Sachs, for instance, is very keen on Remain.
I think looking less from a company perspective and more an individual private perspective.
No, I think people on my side of this debate believe that wages will go up, food prices will fall. Actually, people at the lower end of the income spectrum will benefit, not suffer, if we leave the EU. A triumph of nationalism. It's kind of part of the credo of the European Union that nationalism is evil. It led to 2 world wars, and one of the reasons we have to pool sovereignty and identify more with international institutions like the UN and the EU is as a counterweight to the toxic potential of nationalist movements. I don't agree with that. The system of nation states before the outbreak of the First World War managed to maintain the peace in Europe for 100 years. I think nationalism can easily be a force for good. I don't think feeling patriotic and feeling a sense of belonging and identity in your particular country is bad. And actually, I think the risk of nationalism declining as a source of identity is that people become much more prone to toxic international ideologies. The notion that international ideological movements are somehow benign and that nationalist ideological movements are toxic, I think is just, wrong. International socialism, for instance, which ultimately was responsible for many more deaths than fascism, was an international ideology. Islamism, which is claiming lots of disaffected young men in cities like Coventry, is an internationalist ideology. So I don't buy the idea that nationalism is just bad and internationalism is always good. And I think actually, just as some international institutions can serve as a counterweight to some of the more toxic aspects of nationalism, so nationalism can serve as a useful counterweight to some of the more toxic elements of internationalism.
If I could just make 2 final brief points. Firstly, do you think Barack Obama has the right to put his position on the EU and persuade the British people to vote one way or other? And secondly, I noticed that you're sporting a beard. Is that in response to, are you not going to shave that off until Britain leaves the EU?
No, there's no story behind it. I think Obama is, of course he has the right to express his point of view, but so too do the British people have the right to ignore it. And I do think that he was making the case for Remain because he thinks it's in America's interests. Sorry, I've got a slightly sore throat. He thinks it's in America's interests for Britain to remain within the EU because Britain is America's closest ally, and if we remain in the EU, then the EU is going to be closer as a whole to America. So I can understand why he made the case, but I don't think that means it's in our interests to remain in the EU.
Brilliant. Toby Young, thank you very much, and I hope your vocal cords remain intact for the rest of the campaigning period.
Thank you. My name's Toby Young, and you're listening to Perspectives.